If you've been preparing for your C1 exam and your writing scores are stuck at B2, this video will change everything. Most students fail the C1 writing task 1 because they treat it like a normal essay, but it's not. It's a decision-making task that requires a completely different approach. Hi, I'm Jen, and my students have a 95% first attempt pass rate because I teach them exactly what task 1 of the writing actually requires. In this video, you're going to get the same system that I teach my paying students: the structure, the language, and the strategy that produces consistent high scores. Okay, here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to look at how to analyze the 3 options quickly and strategically. We'll look at my proven structure for decision-making essays, which is what this task is. We'll look at how to choose the winning combination, so what to actually talk about in your essay or write about, the language patterns that show a C1 level evaluation, and we'll have a look at why most students fail this task and how to avoid that. So let's begin by taking a look at what is part 1? What is the task? So in the writing exam for the C1 exam, you have 2 parts. You have part 1, which is what we'll look at today, and part 2. Part 1 is compulsory. You must answer this question. You have to write between 220 and 260 words, and it will be in the style of an essay. So I've given you an example here of how it will look in the exam. You'll be given a question, and you'll be given 3 bullet points of 3 options, and you'll be expected to discuss 2 of those options. You'll also have a separate box here of some opinions expressed in the discussion in which you're going to have to write your essay about. So this task is: your class has attended a panel discussion on facilities which should receive money from local authorities, and you've made these notes below. Which facilities should receive money from local authorities? You have museums, sports centres, and public gardens. And then you have the opinions. Museums aren't popular with everybody, sports centres mean healthier people, etc. You need to write an essay discussing 2 of the facilities. You should explain which facility is more important for local authorities to give money to, giving reasons in support of your answer. So you'll be expected to evaluate, compare, and contrast 2 of the options and choose which one you think is the most important, which one should be given money to, which one is the best for the scenario that is presented to you. So what do you need to do? What is the examiner asking you to do? You're being asked to evaluate 3 options against stated criteria. In the case of this question we've looked at here, the criteria is which facility should receive money from local authorities. So you're going to be asked to evaluate whether that should be museums, whether that should be public spaces, or whether that should be sports centres. You're going to have to choose 2 of the options to discuss in detail. 2 of those 3 options there, those 3 bullet points, and then recommend one option as the best choice. And you need to justify your decisions with specific reasoning. Now, this isn't about your personal opinion. It's not what you think. It's not, I'm going to choose sports centres because I like sports centres. It's about a logical evaluation based on given criteria. Most students fail because they ignore the criteria and just write what they personally prefer. What does the examiner want? The examiner wants to see you do an objective evaluation of each option, to give clear justification based on which one of those options is going to benefit, in the case of this question, the community. You can hear my dog crying in the background. They want you to give a sophisticated comparison of the strengths and weaknesses of these points. What are the pros? What are the cons? And then give a logical recommendation with solid reason. Why have you chosen sports centres as your number 1 choice, for example? So before we even begin writing, we're going to ask ourselves, Which option has the most obvious benefits to discuss? Which option has clear disadvantages that I can address? And which combination gives me the most to write about? This is important. We need to have things to say. So we need to choose the two options that we actually have arguments for. What are the pros? What are the cons? What can I say about this one? What can I say about that one? And that is why, in my opinion, before you start writing anything down, you should take 5 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever you can spare to make a plan. Because that plan is really going to help you when it comes to actually organizing the essay. And that is one of the things that the examiner marks you on, your organization. So it's not just about your grammar, it's not just about your language, but it's about, do you clearly answer the question? And is your answer organized in a way that makes sense and is easy to read? So with this specific example that we're discussing today about which of the services should receive funding from local authorities, we could consider the criteria. We could consider community benefit. So who would the sports centres serve? Who would the museums serve? Who would the public spaces serve? Which of these has long-term value? By giving money to sports centres, is this going to have a long-term sustainable impact? And then we can also consider practical considerations, so cost, maintenance, accessibility, all of these things to give us things to write about. So what would I personally choose in this case? I would choose sports centres and public gardens. Here's why. So for sports centres, there are clear health benefits, it serves all ages, and there's measurable impact. Public gardens, there are environmental benefits, mental health benefits, and it's also a space for community gathering. We can host events there. Museums, they are harder to argue the broader community appeal. If we look here, for example, at the opinions expressed, we have one opinion here that says museums aren't popular with everybody. And that's true. Not everybody likes museums. And I personally think in my case, it would be harder for me to write about the benefits of a museum rather than writing about the benefits of public gardens or museums. So a reminder, always choose the options where you can make the strongest argument. And again, before you start writing anything, plan. Make a plan. What is it about sports centres that you're going to write about? What is it about public gardens? Or if it's not public gardens, it's not sports centres, it's not museums, it's going to be something else. So what is it about this first option? What are the pros? What are the cons? Why do I think this one is better than this one? Write it down before you start actually writing your essay. Okay, so let's look at the 4-paragraph structure that works. This is the way to organize your task 1 of the writing task. Basically, in paragraph 1, you want to set the scene, tell us what are you going to be talking about, introduce the general topic situation from the question. Don't just repeat the question, but let us know, what is your essay about? You should also be acknowledging that there is a challenge. So show that this situation has been a difficult decision to make. You've had to evaluate your different options, and you can demonstrate balanced thinking. The examiners love this, and I'm going to show you what that means in a second. In your introduction, you should also state your plan. So clearly name the 2 options that you've chosen, sports centres and public gardens, public spaces. You want to make sure you're using formal language and avoid vague language like, I will discuss some things. No, tell us exactly what you're going to discuss in this essay. And also give a little preview of your recommendation. State which option you'll recommend as your priority. Give a little brief hint of your main reasoning. And use confident, decisive language. Putting all that together, your introduction would look something like this. Local councils face increasingly difficult decisions regarding community investment priorities, particularly when multiple worthy causes compete for limited resources. So here with that sentence, we're recognizing that all of our options have merit. While all three proposed facilities would benefit residents, a thorough evaluation of long-term community impact suggests sports centres and public gardens represent the most strategic allocation of public funds. So here we've clearly named our two chosen options, with sports facilities ultimately deserving priority funding. We've previewed our recommendation. So now we've got that introduction done, we can move on to paragraph 1, which is your first option analysis. So you want to take sports centres in this case and present the key benefits given specific examples, address any potential limitations. So this shows balanced thinking. I've looked at both sides of sports centres and I've decided this. And also link it to the community criteria, because the question is asking you which of these should get funding to benefit the community. Here's some language that you could use here. Sports centres would undoubtedly provide. The health implications alone justify. Here's the balanced thinking. While initial costs may seem substantial, from a community wellness perspective, and if we put all that together, it can look something like this. So I'll read this one out for you. I won't read the rest, but sports centres would provide significant benefits to the local community by addressing widespread health concerns and offering facilities for all age groups. Regular physical activity programs could help combat rising obesity rates while providing structured activity for young people, potentially reducing antisocial behaviour in the area. Although, linking word, initial construction cost may seem substantial, the long-term savings in healthcare expenses and the positive impact on community well-being justify the investment. Furthermore, another linking word, sports facilities tend to attract users from diverse backgrounds, creating opportunities for social integration and community building that extend far beyond simple exercise provision. This is a really high-level C1 essay. Yours doesn't have to be so grammatically perfect. The language doesn't have to be so complex, but if you can be using these connectors of although, furthermore, while this, on the other hand this, if you can use this kind of language, you'll get higher marks. So we've looked at sports centres. The next paragraph we want to look at is the second option, in this case public gardens. So we want to smoothly transition into the second option, offer different benefits, compare and contrast with the first option. And, we can use some language here such as equally compelling, though in different ways. Public gardens offer a complementary approach, while sports centres address physical health. Public gardens focus on mental health. And if you put all of that together, it would look something like this. So I'm going to pause, or ask you to pause, read that paragraph, take note of the language that I've used, such as additionally, these spaces would provide, this kind of language. So pause for a moment, have a read, and then we'll move on to the final paragraph, which is your final recommendation. So now you're going to state very clearly which of those two options gets priority. Is it the sports centres or is it the public gardens? And why? Justify your choice with logical reasoning. Acknowledge the value of the second option. So we can end this with language such as, on balance, sports centres warrant priority funding because while both facilities would enhance community life, ultimately, I believe sports centres, blah, blah, blah. The long-term benefits of this investment will. So here would be your final paragraph. Again, pause, read through it, and you can see how we've gone from our introduction. Okay, so now we have our structure. We know what to put in each paragraph. Let's look at some C1 language that shows evaluation skills. Language for comparing and contrasting. So a basic sort of B2 comparison would be sports centres are better than museums. What about if we put that into C1 level? While museums offer cultural benefits, sports centres would have a more direct impact on public health. Can you see the difference there? Let's take a look at language for evaluation. So instead of good, at C1 level, you should really be avoiding words like good, bad, and show that you have a higher level of vocabulary. So good could become beneficial, effective, valuable, worthwhile. Bad could be limited, problematic, less sustainable, insufficient. So changing up these simple adjectives for something a bit more complex can again boost your marks. Language for justification. This option would be effective because the main advantage of this approach is this choice is justified by the strongest argument for sports centres is. And what about for recommendations? Overall, sports centres would be the better investment. The most practical choice would be sports centres deserve priority funding because the evidence supports investing in. And finally, language for balanced thinking. It seems that this would likely result in sports centres appears to offer. One could argue that if you can learn a few of these sentences, because you'll be able to use them for each paragraph, then you've got a really solid start for your essay without even knowing what the topic is. Finally, the last part of this video, we're going to look at common mistakes that kill your score and how to avoid them. The first thing, ignoring the third option. The wrong approach would be never to mention museums at all. The right approach would be to briefly acknowledge why you didn't choose it. I hold my hand up and say I actually didn't do that in this essay that I wrote out for you. I did mention in the introduction that there were 3 options to choose from, but you could say a bit more. You could throw in somewhere maybe in the conclusion, in the final paragraph of ultimately we decided against museums because they don't have a wider community appeal. Something like that. Just a quick brief sentence to acknowledge that that was considered but ultimately disregarded. The second mistake that people make is using personal preference language. We don't want to say things like, I love sports, so sports centres are the best. We want to avoid those personal opinions and say more general opinions such as sports centres document public health concerns. See how much better that sounds? The third mistake, weak justification. So you want to really back up your answers, say why you've chosen it. Public gardens are nice and people like them. Okay, can you give us a bit more? Public gardens contribute to mental well-being while addressing urban environmental challenges. Wow, okay, much better. And finally, make sure that you make a clear recommendation. You should avoid saying like both are equally good. No, sports centres, why? Give a clear choice with logical reasoning. So if you can avoid these 4 mistakes, your essay is already going to be up there with the top marks. If you want this level of analysis and feedback on your writing with someone who can spot these mistakes immediately and help you fix them, that's exactly what my 6-month Cambridge C1 Success Program provides. My students get unlimited essay corrections and weekly coaching sessions, and that's why 95% of my students pass on their first attempt, with 100% of my students passing their C1 exam since 2019. If you're ready to master not just task 1 of the writing, but all aspects of the Cambridge C1 exam, check the link in the description for my C1 Success Program. There are limited spots available for the rest of 2025.